signatures, applications, and design directions. Let me go back once upon a time to a paper that more than 50 years ago, by all means, can be rightly called seminal. This is conjugate coding by Stefan Wisner. In that paper, you can trace the beginnings of quantum cryptography, but also, perhaps lesser known, is the second example that is given in that paper, which is about quantum money. The key idea is quite similar to those of you that know quantum key distribution, and it is about preparing a sequence of qubits that are prepared in different bases according to a secret mapping that is maintained by the bank. People can exchange these quantum tokens, but only the bank is capable of reading them properly. So, moving on, fast forward 50 years later to 2020, quantum information theory has flourished, and to a large degree inspired by Wisner's seminal work, we have quantum key distribution, but also an array of other exciting developments, such as Shor's algorithm, Grover's algorithm, public key quantum money, quantum lightning, and finally bringing me to the topic of this presentation, one-shot signatures. These are digital signatures that have a secret key that self-destructs after it is used just once. So what is one-shot signatures formally? The syntax of this primitive is that what you see on the slide. And I should mention that I'm going to use this color coding, blue for quantum and black for classical elements in the slide. So in a one-shot signature, we have a classical setup that produces a common reference string. We have a quantum key generation that produces a secret key, which is quantum, and a verification key, and a signing algorithm that, given that quantum secret key, produces a signature on a given message. Finally, the verifier, as usually in a digital signature, is capable of validating the validity of a message against the public key. The correctness is what you usually expect from a digital signature, and crucially, we have the one-shot property, which at a high level says that the secret key can only be used to sign at most one single message, and the unforgeability property that given the verification key, now no quantum adversary can sign a message. So formally, unforgeability is quite simplified. Given the one-shot property, you can just look at the verification key and produce a forgery. After all, what we hope from the one-shot property is that no one, including the signer, is capable of producing two digital signatures. Then the one-shot property comes in an even simpler game, where what happens is that the adversary, just knowing the common reference string, is capable of producing two valid message signature pairs. It's worth pointing out that the one-shot property is it's a very strong security property, and in fact, we would imply unforgeability. So just to see the point, consider that you have a forgery attacker that is given a verification key, it's possible to produce a valid message signature pair, as we described it in our forgery attack. Now, we can run the signing algorithm on the side of the challenger if you want. That will produce another signature, and we can choose a different message. So by correctness, this will give us two valid signatures, which of course means that the one-shot property has been violated. For this reason, it's sufficient for us to just produce, to just focus on the one-shot property. So let me give you some technical context about one-shot signatures, what brought us to the development of that primitive. So first of all, an important result of about 10 years ago was by Aronson and Cristiano, who gave a classical oracle-based construction for quantum money from hidden subspaces. Now, the key advance here was that this paves the way for publicly verifiable quantum money by the potential obfuscation of these oracles. In a completely different line of work, Abaenis, Rosmanis, and Unruh in 14, they put forward what they called the pick one technique. And that was a method that could help argue insecurity of sigma protocols in the quantum setting. More on that in a moment. A few years later, Unruh in 16 defined the concept of collapsing hash function or collapse binding hash functions in his effort to capture formally the required properties of a hash function in the post-quantum setting. And then last point in the context here I want to add is Xantri's result in 2019, which formulated what he called win-win results, where the non-collapsing property now seen from a positive light as a way to exploit and derive useful cryptographic primitives. In that case, the direction was in what he called quantum lightning. Speaking about hash functions and the collapsing property, it's interesting to consider here what you might call the quantum flavors of collision resistance. So starting with collision resistance, what we want is to be hard to find two different x0, x1 values that they're mapped on the same target by the hash function. Now, in the second level, you can think of another property that you might call unequivocal, which means that there is no efficient adversary can find a hash target y and a predicate q, so that later, given a bit b, it is possible to find a preimage x, so that the predicate q is satisfied and the hash function maps x to y. Finally, a strengthening of that would be what you might call collapsing. So if you consider uy to be the preimage set of the target value y, having access to a superposition of uy inside, let's say, that set should not be no more useful than having a random element of uy. It's actually very easy to see that collapsing is the strongest property, and that would imply the function being unequivocal, and finally that would imply that the function is collision resistant. Nevertheless, the reverse implications are not obvious at all. In fact, from a security perspective, we would like the function to be collapsing, and that's exactly the case where collapsing was introduced in the context of what does it mean for a function to be properly secure in a post-quantum setting. So non-collapse was viewed as a problem, and it is a problem indeed if one expects from a hash function to behave properly in the post-quantum setting. And by properly here, it would be behaving essentially in the way that hash functions, secure hash functions, do behave in the classical setting. So observe that in principle, it is possible for a function to be collision resistant and non-collapsing. For instance, due to no cloning, and despite the fact that there might be some uncertainty in the pre-image set in a superposition inside UY, it might be possible that this state cannot be used to produce two different pre-images of Y. So, nevertheless, despite the fact that collision resistance might be true in the post-quantum sense, there is a problem about this type of non-collapsing property, as it somehow suggests that the hashing is non-committing. But this also led to the so-called win-win results that formulated by Zandri. So quantum lightning is such an application that could be derived by a hash function that is suitably non-collapsing and collision resistant. And quantum lightning is a primitive that in many ways strengthen public key quantum money. It has a quantum key generation that generates what's called a bolt, and the bolt could be verified, resulting to a unique serial number, but it's not possible to clone a bolt, so it's not possible to have two bolts that have the same serial number. Now, one of the key observations here is that there is actually much more interesting things to do in that space, and in fact we will describe now interesting implications of the equivocality concept in the context of our primitive one-shot signatures. So speaking of equivocal hash function, let's get to a definition. So the syntax is what you see here. We have a quantum key generation that produces a secret key, a target Y, as well as a predicate Q. The hash function operates as expected, so it maps a string X to its target Y, but the interesting part is on this quantum algorithm that equivocates given the secret key, which is also quantum. And the key point is that it equivocates around the predicate Q. So if we give it a value B, it's going to find a pre-image of Y that satisfies Q. Otherwise, from a security perspective, we would like H to be collision resistant. And it is actually quite straightforward that there is a connection here to the being one shot. Obviously, if we were able to keep equivocating, we would be able to break this one-shot property. So the connection that we're going to make is quite simple to see. So if you have an equivocal hash, it's possible to derive a one-shot signature in this fashion. The signing key is exactly the signing key that is given as input to the equivocation algorithm. And then the verification key is the predicate Q as well as Y, the target against which we can equivocate. The signing algorithm is just the equivocation algorithm, and then what we need to verify then is just simply apply the hashing on the signature, which is X, and then making sure that the predicate matches the bit. Now observe that this will give us a signature for single bits. Another point that is worth making is that collision resistance is only needed around the predicate Q. So this means that if we're actually able to get collisions that do not split Q, so to speak, then that's actually not a problem from the security of one-shot signatures. Basically, this means that given a signature for 0, maybe you can find another signature for 0. But the key point is that we would like it to be infeasible to find two signatures for two different messages. And in that case, we have only two choices. So how do we construct equivocal hashing? So obviously, the challenging part, or one of the major challenges, let's say from a design perspective, is instantiating the equivocation algorithm. So it's an algorithmic design problem in the quantum setting. But of course, we would like to do that at the same time without making the function completely insecure, right? So we would like it to maintain some degree of collision resistance. So the inspiration here for the approach is that I will present to you. It comes from this so-called pick one trick from the Ambainis, Rosmanis, and Unruh work, where essentially is a type of adapted Grover search. Now, Grover's algorithm is one of the classical algorithms in quantum computing. And just as a reminder, it works in the following way. So you have a function that is defined on a space X, let's say outputs 1 bit, and you are looking to find an X value that satisfies f of X equals 1. Now there could be just one of those values, or there could be many, and we can actually divide the total possible set into these yes values and the no values. So the way the algorithm works is that we start with a superposition of all possible x's, and then the algorithm has the following fundamental step. The first thing it does is that it applies what's called like a phase shift on that superposition, which you can think of it as a quantum operation that negates the sign of the solution. And then it has this diffusion operator that what it does is that it goes to this superposition and reflects all the amplitudes about the mean amplitude. Now, it's helpful actually to think of the geometric interpretation of this algorithm. That's much more intuitive. The key idea is that the shift operation can be seen as a reflection about the no axis, and you can think of it as actually two-dimensional. Grover can be seen as a two-dimensional type of algorithm that operates in this yes-no space. So you can see also in the diagram here at the bottom, that's the initial superposition, and then we have the reflection about the no axis, and then the second step, the diffusion operation, actually is a reflection about the psi. So what's happening after this reflection is we get this blue arrow, and the intuition here is that every step of Grover is actually lifting this value towards the yes direction. So the key point is that if we do this enough, and actually in the classical case of Grover, where we're just looking 1 out of n elements, it is proven that if you do this square root of n steps, then you brought this blue arrow close to the yes direction, and then by measuring, it's possible to obtain the solution. So what is the Grover adaptation that's happening in the Albanese work? They start with an arbitrary subset, and that's some subset of the space we're interested in. So that's the important departure from Grover. So we don't have a superposition of everything, but we have a superposition of something that can be secret. And our objective is to find an element that matches a given predicate Q. So obviously we cannot just run Grover because we are now inside this restricted space. But what they observe is that even though Grover just out of the box doesn't work, it's possible to have a relativized version with respect to some quantum oracles they define that help actually Grover go forward. So essentially they operate these reflections I mentioned using these oracles, and then they prove with just a little bit of work that Grover can actually give them what they need. So they actually go to this trouble because they want to establish an argument that there are some classical sigma protocols that are proof of knowledge, but they are impossible to extract from in the quantum sense. So there is basically a quantum prover that can be convincing, but it's just impossible to extract knowledge from that prover. And this fundamentally comes from this pick one technique. And now you might feel some connection to what I was saying earlier about one-shot signatures. If you think the prover here as the signer who is capable of producing like one signature but cannot produce two. That's also, this is fundamental actually in knowledge extraction, that two accepting conversations can be used to produce a witness. But now we're going to repurpose this idea to our setting for producing equivocal hashing. So the design approach is that our hash function is going to have input all n bit strings, and we're going to split them into a number of subsets. Our desired hash function basically is going to compress an n bit string to an n over 2 bit string. And the output of the hash function would be, let's say, the label of every one of these subsets. And the construction approach would be to generate the key is just going to be a superposition query of H to compute Y, and our secret key is going to be that superposition. We're going to set the predicate Q to be just the first bit of X, and then to equivocate, we're going to try to use this idea of adapting Grover to discover an X value that matches our bit that we want to equivocate, and of course the remaining pre-image of our Y value. Now, the challenge here is this adapted Grover uses quantum oracles to implement the reflections that are needed, which, that's okay if we were to make some, argument about the security of sigma protocols, but it's not at all okay here, where we want to move towards an actual instantiation of this hash function. So here is our construction from classical oracles based on this joint work with Amos, Georgiou, and Zantry in 2020. So the key observation is that we're gonna introduce some algebraic structure into these UI sets, basically these pre-mat sets of the hash function. Now this algebraic structure is going to help us create some classical oracles that will help us do exactly the same job that these quantum oracles in the Albanese child construction did and helped to get Grover going. there's two important observations. So first of all is that if we get the superposition of this pre-image set, and we assume that now that this is an affine subspace of the vector space of all n bit strings, and we apply a quantum Fourier transform, and then a membership step on the orthogonal space, and then another quantum Fourier transform, this is going to take us back to the superposition inside the pre-image set. In fact, this observation about subspaces goes back to the quantum money verification in the Aronson and Cristiano paper. Now, another aspect here, which is, if you want, the complementary of that, is that if we apply exactly the same operation now in the subspace orthogonal to this superposition of pre-image sets, then we're going to get a minus sign in front of it. And this is exactly the type of thing that we want to do to argue that this unitary operation is exactly what we need in order to implement Grover. So, in a nutshell, this is how the construction is going to go. We're going to assume two oracles now that you can think of them as classical oracles. The first one is the hash function, which given an input x, which is an n bit string, it maps it to the corresponding label of the subspace. And then we have this orthogonal oracle, which is what we need in order to implement Grover, which given x and y, it will return accept or reject, depending on whether the x value is orthogonal to the subspace of the preimages of the target value y. Now, this is an oracle-based construction, so you have to now consider how everything works in this relativized sense. So the key generation will basically evaluate H on uniform superposition. Our secret key is going to be a superposition inside the pre-image set. Our output is going to be the value y, which we can measure and produce it as a string, so a classical verifier can use it. And then our predicate q, around which we're going to equivocate, is just going to be the first bit of x. The equivocation algorithm is going to be this adapted Grover, but now using only the classical oracle. So that's the only thing we need about the function h. So to be clear, the algorithm of course is quantum, but the access, the information that we need about the hash function can be seen as a classical oracle. The total equivocation, the way it's going to work, is that it's going to apply Grover and keep checking whether we have succeeded in producing the bit that we desire in the first position. And it's possible to prove that a small number of queries will be needed, so small number of iterations will be needed in order to produce the equivocation that we need, which, as we said, leads to the signature. So this completes the one-shot signature construction from classical oracles. And now we're going to take a small break from the quantum aspects, and we're going to come to some of the motivation that we have for looking into this primitive. So let's see what interesting cryptography we can get from one-shot signatures. So the first primitive I would like to discuss is called budget signatures. A budget signature is a digital signature where the public key is associated with a budget, and the budget association is made by a certification authority, comes and produces a certificate and associates the public key of the budget signature with a particular budget. Without loss of generality, let's say it's 1. Now, what happens in the budget signature, every time the signer produces a signature, it associates a portion of their budget with the signature. And this is done by using the one-shot signature repeatedly. So you start with an initial verification key by one-shot signature. That's what's been certified. And then you proceed to split the budget in this tree structure. For instance, in this case, we have 2 new verification keys which are produced by the signer, and each one of them now are certified for a budget, in this particular case, 0.4 and 0.6. Observe that the sum is always, in this case, 1, which is the node above these 2 keys in the tree. Further, only the top, the root of the tree, is certified by the authority. The signer themselves, they can produce these certifications further down the tree. Observe that it's absolutely up to the signer to produce the splits that they desire. And now the verifier, whenever they want to verify a signature, finally on a message, now you can think of message being a leaf on that tree, then that leaf is associated with a particular budget, which is, you can think of it as being spent. Verifying the whole tree is something that the verifier can do to ensure that the budget has been split accordingly, or at least as many nodes from the tree as needed. And of course, we can use snarks to compress the signature size at the end to bring it to a constant. Some immediate applications here is what we can call divisible quantum cash with a classical bank. So you can think of the merchant would eventually receive a deposit signature for any value C that the signer is willing to produce, and then he can claim that value from the bank. Now, if you compare that construction to classic eCash, you can observe that this has this unique property that the bank is completely offline during payment, but the merchant can be absolutely certain that the payment has went through, as long as they can verify the certification of the budget signature. I'm moving on to another primitive that we call ordered signatures. In that case, every signature is associated with a time tag, and the security is that we cannot sign messages with tags in the past. So you can think of the ordered signature as this sequence that the signer certifies future keys, again at every time using a one-shot signature, and then there's this timestamp that goes only forward. The verification happens by verifying all signatures, and that the sequence of timestamp is forward, and of course the verifier can take into account the current time depending on the use case that ordered signatures are being used. Now you can think an immediate relationship here to key evolving signatures, where we get a guarantee that the key in the past has been destroyed. Finally, the whole system the whole signature can be burned. The whole signature can be burned by signing, let's say, at the time point of infinity. So there's no more messages possible to be signed. The final application is public coin proofs of quantumness. And essentially, this is a two-party protocol where the prover wishes to convince the verifier that is a quantum algorithm. And this is actually a simple scheme. Given one-shot signatures, the prover produces the verification key to the verifier. The verifier gives a random message to be signed, and the prover just produces a one-shot signature on that message. Observe that the proof of quantumness comes from the fact that if we have a classical prover that is convincing, then we could apply rewinding to get two messages, and that would break the one-shot security. Now let me move to applications to blockchain protocols, which was also one of my motivations for looking at this primitive and trying to understand how it can be used in that context. Just as a bit of a recall about how these protocols work, focusing on Nakamoto style, what we might call Nakamoto style ledger consensus, the participants continuously, what they do in this protocol, update their local state based on the best available chain of blocks that they see. They usually use a rule here, like longest chain rule or the heaviest weight rule. So they have a way of sorting out given chains. And then they attempt to produce the next block. And this is done via a lottery mechanism that is based on some resource that the participants possess. For example, it could be proof of work. The block contents are the transactions, and if a new block is found, it's disseminated immediately to the network. Now, the key properties of Nakamoto-style consensus is consistency, liveness. I mean, these are the two key properties of these ledger consensus protocols, where consistency means that essentially what is being built here inside this blockchain data structure is a history of transaction. And if you look at different participants in the network, they have a consistent view of that. They made, so the view of one is a prefix of the view of another. And liveness says that as new transactions are being disseminated in the network, they are incorporated in that ledger. Finally, a third property, which is very interesting in these protocols, is this so-called self-healing property, where consistency, liveness hold if you have the right conditions in terms of the resources of the participants that follow the protocol. In particular, the adversary controls resources that are in the minority of total active resources. But if you have a violation of that rule, the protocol has the ability to self-heal after a certain period of time, which is proportional to the degree of the violation. Now, these Nakamoto-style consensus protocols, they have a number of, in the literature, there's been a number of different ways that we've observed, that we've discovered, let's say, and we are capable of implementing the resource. Computational power is the original one, the one proposed in Nakamoto, but this comes with the challenge of the electricity expenditure that comes with proof of work. So there's a number of different resources that has been considered, which is proof of space and proof of stake. So aside of the waste of resources that you get in non-proof of stake approaches, some other challenges is what is called costless simulation in proof of stake protocols, something that we'll explain in a moment. The long wait times to ensure settlement with high probability, and blockchain bloat, sometimes as it is called, that the fact that we have like the full nodes maintaining a large number of transactions, basically a transaction graph, in order to validate the protocol state. So the first application is what I call quantum Bitcoin with instant off-chain classical settlement. So this is essentially a combination of the one-shot signature idea with the Bitcoin blockchain. So the Bitcoin blockchain is being used only to record the mined Bitcoin, no transactions basically, or only we record the coin-based transactions. And every mined block basically instantiates a budget signature, the primitive that we just defined. So the Bitcoin holders, in this way, they can spend any fraction of their Bitcoin and ultimately all Bitcoin is are verified against these mining events in the common blockchain. The transfer of Bitcoin, despite the quantumness, let's say, of the secret keys involved, the whole system remains classical from a verification perspective. So in a way, you can think of this system as using the blockchain only to control the monetary policy, to also enables agreement about the monetary policy. So for instance, we can still have the rule in Bitcoin that approximately every 2 weeks, we have a fixed amount of Bitcoin that is mined. The settlement time of year is immediate and off-chain, perhaps with the exception of freshly minted Bitcoin that the participants might want to wait a bit before using them to ensure settlement. And then as a final point here, it's if such a protocol can be constructed, it's possible to transition the existing Bitcoin network via hard fork to this quantum version. So the only thing that's needed is to continue to service the transition transactions that go from the pre-quantum era to the quantum era, and then you can go to that setting where you have off-chain transactions with instant settlement. Another application, which is very interesting, it has to do with the so-called long-range attacks. So in first, in a common, well-known and broadly discussed topic in proof-of-stake blockchains is what's called a costless simulation attack, where the adversary reuses block opportunities to sign multiple histories, like the cases of the blocks A, B above. And this may lead to what's called as long-range attacks, where the adversary can construct an alternative legitimate history for the whole blockchain if he has a dishonest majority among some proof-of-stake cryptographic keys that basically held control of the blockchain at some point in the past. Now, the reason that these attacks are serious is that these keys could be subverted after they have been depleted, let's say, of their stake. So this is a serious problem for proof-of-stake, and there is a number of mitigations that people have considered. An important one is around key evolving keys, where basically you have to erase past keys. And this matches the Ouroboros line of work and Algorand. Then there is the idea of using economic incentives to incentivize that keys are erased. And another idea is to use verifiable delay functions to embed a concept of time or passage of time within every blockchain, within the blockchain itself. And finally, using the possibility of using more than one resource, so you might have stake, but you may also have transactions, which is in a way, for example, in some systems, undelegated stake to produce some type of checkpoint that could be used to help in the case of a long-range attack. So there's a number of mitigations, the summary here, but none of them is as comprehensively solving the problem as you get it in the proof-of-work case. The proof-of-work case is just infeasible to mount any attack of that type, given that costless simulation is just infeasible by nature of proof-of-work. So it doesn't take a lot of imagination to think that our concept of ordered signatures, thinking of them as key-evolving signatures, is exactly what can be used to instantiate this quantum-enhanced proof-of-stake blockchain. So basically, issuing a block means that we update the clock of every verification key with a current timestamp, and the one-shot property would ensure that the same key cannot sign a past time point, and hence all these long-range attacks would not be feasible. So now let's go back to quantum for a short discussion about what comes forward in terms of instantiating these concepts. So how can we find non-collapsing functions with good properties? So recall our construction is the one you see on the right of this slide here. And as you recall, we were supposed to produce this hash function. So by all means, this is a strange hash function, right? It's a hash function that produces the pre-image set of a target value is an affine subspace. So let's take here a first attempt. We pick a vector space that has dimension n minus t, where t is the parameter. And then what we try to do is that we take that vector space and we sort of copy paste it everywhere by offsetting it so that we cover the whole space. So certainly this gives us the structure we want. So this actually does the job from the Grover perspective. So we get what we need, but it's also insecure. And the reason that it's insecure is that we can actually mount a hidden subgroup type of attack. And it's actually quite simple. Like what the attacker would do is we calculate H in superposition and then apply a quantum Fourier transform and measure. This will give him the ability to sample vectors in the orthogonal space. Once they do this enough, they're going to be able to calculate the hidden vector space S. And observe that this is an oracle attack. There's nothing to do actually with how we might be able to instantiate this as an actual, let's say, common reference string via. So here is what we can do better. We call this pseudorandom fractured subspaces, and it's based on a pseudorandom function and an invertible PRF. To define the hash, we compute for t steps the following. First, we get a vector, and this gives us, as with inner product with the input x, the first label. Then using that label, we get a second vector, and again another inner product. And then using these two labels, we get the third vector, and so forth. So repeating this t times is going to give us a label of length t, and in the end we return as the y output the invertible PRF applied on that label. Now to implement the orthogonal oracle, we invert the PRF, we get the decryption of the label L, and then using the PRF we recover all the vectors. This determines the subspace, and now we can test for orthogonality. So we can prove various interesting facts about this function. Classically behaves like a PRF, but not quantumly, obviously, and as expected, as we have this ability to do this orthogonal oracle and enables this Grover search. The dimension is of the affine subspaces is high with high probability. They're disjoint. They're mostly non-parallel, and they have a good split with respect to the first bit, as we want. And they have a fairly structured collisions. So in particular, if we have a collision x and x prime, then the difference of these two values is a pre-image of 0. So how do we instantiate then H and H orthogonal? We can just use indistinguishability obfuscation, and these obfuscated versions become part of the common reference string, and that's the candidate for one-shot signatures for one-bit messages. And of course, via parallel repetition, we can and post-quantum hashing, we can get arbitrary message length one-shot signature. As a final point for arguing security of these constructions, it's worth to consider more relaxed notions of one-shot signatures. And I'll give you here an example. What we call one-shot signatures with two-party classical key generation, which is basically the same primitive, but in key generation there is a classical party, let's call him T, who is trusted for the one-shot property, but doesn't have to be trusted for unforgeability. So it turns out that we're able to get a construction about this for which security we can argue in a more sophisticated fashion. So the approach is to, I'm focusing here on the key generation between the key generation algorithm and the trusted party. The idea is that the trusted party gives a fully homomorphic encryption of a hidden subspace, and then this is transposed into a so-called hidden coset by the key generation algorithm. And then at the next step, we have a two-party computation that results in these obfuscations that you see at the bottom, which are these two membership tests. The key idea here is the first subcomponent is based on Shmueli's semi-quantum tokenized signatures, while the broader idea that you're able to sign this comes from the tokenized signatures concept from the Colandangelo, Liu, and Zandri paper. The key distinction here is that it's possible to put all that together along with post-quantum two-party computation to generate a one-shot signature with such a classical key generation that is held by the party T, which crucially is not trusted for unforgeability. Observe that the signature algorithm is very simple. We just apply quantum Fourier transform to sign the bit 1 on the hidden coset that is produced by the quantum fully homomorphic encryption on the key generation side. So let's wrap up with directions. We instantiate, the biggest direction is how to instantiate cubical hash functions. So we've seen here the idea of pseudorandom fractured subspaces and indistinguishability obfuscation. What are other options and other assumptions? For instance, there's knot theory that coming from the domain of quantum money from earlier work of Fari et al. 2012. Other approaches for one-shot signatures, we have this adaptation of Grover here with classical oracles and indistinguishability obfuscation. More recently, Spooner and Dalano, they demonstrated via quantum rewinding argument that it's possible to get from any non-collapsing distinguisher a one-shot commitment, which is enough for one-shot signatures. That's another design approach. And finally, if we're able to get quantum obfuscation, this may enable also additional options for designing these primitives, going back to the quantum oracle approach of Ambainis et al. Getting one-shot signatures from plausible assumptions is obviously a huge open question. There is a question of whether and to what extent we can capitalize on properties of indistinguishability obfuscation to establish the security of allowing these oracles in obfuscated form. Finally, as I briefly showed in the last example, weaker forms of one-shot signatures that are still useful are worth exploring. So we had this quick example on two-party key generation. And it's interesting to explore other relaxation. So for example, like a public coin version. With this, I'll wrap up. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm looking forward to questions and discussions that you may have about one-shot signatures, their applications, and design directions. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the Aggelos and for the wonderful talk and the wonderful work and also wonderful applications. So now we open we have actually Aggelos is online and have take a few questions. And if any of you have any question, maybe can. Maybe you can speak a little bit slowly so that the speaker can hear.
Thanks for the talk. One question regarding the
Alex, did you hear the question, or maybe the voice?
Unfortunately, almost nothing came.
Can you speak a bit
Came
louder?
through, yeah. Or maybe you can repeat the question, Tom. Maybe that's
Okay. I'll let
that's the only way.
repeat the question.
Or you can, if there's a microphone to pass around, maybe that would work.
Yeah, or maybe we get this one. Sorry.
So yeah, the question was regarding the proof of quantumness application. So there you had the prover generate the keys themselves, right? Do you get any issues then with soundness? Like, do you need any additional properties to make sure that the prover actually executes the generation procedure to rely on the security, or yeah, how do you make sure that this works?
Yeah, no, as far as I can tell, I don't think we need any extra properties for that. Yeah, I'm not sure what you have in mind, but yeah.
I mean, in the security game, the
recall
challenger,
something.
sorry, in the security game, the challenger was executing the generation procedure, right? Of the signature scheme, no? And then
No.
send over both of the
No.
keys, and then you have to break the one-shot property, right?
No.
In the proof of quantumness protocol, the prover was in charge of doing that.
Yeah, okay. So sorry, when you say challenger, I got confused. You mean the the verifier?
You see what I'm saying? Does this make sense?
Yeah, let me try to pull back the slide. Might be helpful.
Do you want to share your screen?
Yeah, I could try to do that, assuming we have time. So figure out. All right, so let me just quickly. I think I can make it. Just give me 1 second. I'm almost there. Sharing the screen. Oh, I'm going to stop you sharing the screen. I'm not sure how bad is that. Yes. All right. So the prover sends the verification key. The verifier sends the random message. So I just want to double check. You mentioned challenger, so
Yes, in the security game, for the one-shot property, the challenger would send over the verification key as well as the secret key, right? And then the adversary would try to two signatures, no?
No. Okay, so that's the one-shot property. The adversary just boom sends everything.
Oh, okay. So okay.
Yeah, so it's a very strong. So this one shot is a very strong property, right?
All right, I missed that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Maybe we have time to have one more question. Any other question? So I have one. So you showed the very nice construction, or like one shot signature from the quantum capability. And can we actually generalize the idea to broader setting, like maybe NISQ or even more? Also one shot, something like that.
One shot something else, yeah. One shot something else. Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, to some degree, you can think of other primitives that have the same property, and people have been working on that as well. I think like you can think of encryption for instance with a secret key, which is well, self-destructing, let's say. So you can use it. You can use it more than a specified number of times. So yeah, so I think that's
that would be also tremendously that would be also tremendously interesting. So in general, the ability of using these quantum techniques to control the sort of lifespan or functionality of cryptographic keys is, I think it's really fascinating, and it gives us also a glimpse on how these quantum techniques actually. It's like the flip side of the bad news that come with quantum computers. So that the flip side is that this quite amazing properties that are feasible quantumly, but classically are unthinkable. So I think that's another. I would say I think also, as you mentioned in your introduction, Qiang, this is a great message that says understanding these techniques has a lot of potential for cryptographic design. So yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity here.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe one last question is your nice pictures coming from ChatGPT?
Oh yeah, I should have mentioned. Yeah. I was supposed to have a little attribution there. So my little sheep pictures are from actually the Microsoft tool.
Okay, so let's thank our vice speaker again. Thank you for staying.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so you can enjoy the break. And thank you so much, Aggelos.
Yeah, thanks, Qiang. And again, my it's such a pity that I'm missing being with you there in person.
Yeah, hope everything gets well very soon. So and hope. Oh, actually, the organizer also have something for you, so I'll just keep it for you. Until
okay, great. So I have the.
Yeah, you come get it from.
Exactly. I'll come and get it.
Okay, take care.
Bye, Qiang.